Okay, welcome to another location of Mobility with Matt. Today's class is all about spines. Basically, I am sick and tired of hearing my mates who are in their early 30s moan about how their backs are hurting since they've had kids. So I've had a baby as well, and I'm going to show you a few techniques which I think will at least send you down the rabbit hole of taking back control of your spine. Now, within the system that I use, spines, when we think about spines, we think about flexion and extension first and then rotation. So predominantly today, we'll be focused on those two movements first. So that flexion and extension. We also are going to talk, although I'm not going to go through it, I'm going to talk to you about how to individually train each segment of your spine. The reason I'm not going to go into it is because it doesn't really lend itself to an exciting class. And also, I haven't seen your individual spine. So some people will be feeling think they've got, they're a bit stiff in their lower back, some people in the middle, some people at the top, and it would take me ages to do the whole thing. So I will tell you how to get some sensitivity back in that spine, and then you can use some of these techniques, the other techniques that we're going to use for those specific areas. Okay, so this will be definitely a class thing rather than an individual thing, but it will be of use to you. Okay, we'll start off with some breathing drills and then some targeted controlled articular rotations. We'll then go through the classic cat-camel, okay, and you will be able to if you're filming yourself, that might be helpful, all right, but you'll be able to feel how segmented your spine is initially, how much control do you actually have, and then hopefully at the end we'll go back to it and then you'll feel like you've got a little bit more control and a little bit more awareness of what your spine is doing. I will then go into the explanation about the hinge point training, so I'll come back to that. And then we will get into not just the moving of the spine, but I think if you want to see improvement, we also have to then think about training spines in different positions. Okay, maybe you are feeling the stress and the strain at the moment because your spine is being asked to do things and be in positions that it's just unfamiliar with. Bending down, in my case, bending down into cots, picking up babies, holding them at weird angles. Okay, when most of the time our lives don't involve that kind of variation of movement. So for a healthy spine, we want one that segments well, so it moves individually and not just at one point. We also want a spine that has the capacity to move in a variety of ways. Okay, right. Without further ado, let's start with the breathing drills. Now, I often talk about when we're doing things using some of the techniques, pails and rails. I say a breath in, breathe the rib cage down, and then we will start. So let's everybody lie on their back to start with. Now you could have your legs long here, or you can have your knees bent. I'm going to do mine with knees bent, okay? I'm getting feedback from the floor, and hopefully everybody now can feel the floor in their lower back, okay? Some of us who are already pulled into this big extension pattern, okay, will be struggling to feel that, all right? But as we breathe, I want you to think about trying to get more contact with the floor. If you need a cushion behind your head, that's also fine. All right. I'm going to ask everybody to have their hands on their rib cage so that they can feel their abs, okay, but also the bottom of their ribs. We're just going to take a series of 3 to 5 breaths now through the nose, in through the nose, out through the nose. Deep breath, okay, and then a long, slow breath out. Not a full exhale, so you don't have to get all the residual air out, but pretty much, further than you would normally breathe, okay, particularly when you're breathing out. So as we breathe in now, I want you to increase pressure into the floor through your low back. We go in, you'll feel the belly expand, maybe expanding out. Hold for just a second and then breathe out through the nose. If your hands are where I asked them to be, you can think about your hands meshing together as you breathe out. Keep the rib cage where it is. Breathe in again, lower back into the floor. Breathe out. 3, breathe in. Pressure into the floor through the low back. Breathe out. Rib cage traveling down towards the pelvis. 4, 5. Lower back into the floor, not chest up towards the ceiling. And breathe out. That drill alone and getting control of your rib cage can help a lot, all right? Particularly if you spend a lot of time in this extension pattern. So if your lower back is off the floor, rib cage pointing up, just by learning how to breathe or be aware of where your rib cage is, getting it to come down, and that works in this position. So if you're struggling to feel your back on the floor and you're a bit like this, okay, learning to breathe that rib cage down can start to bring you into a little bit more flexion when actually you're just getting into a more neutral position, okay, away from that sort of extension, shallow breathing up here. Okay, it's not the be all and end all. You perhaps will need to put in a little bit of specific stuff, which is what we're going to go to now, but learning to do that breathing, getting that rib cage to travel down, can be of huge benefit to you if you're in this extension pattern. The reason being is you breathe a lot during the day. So if you can become more aware of where your rib cage is, you're going to get a lot more of that training just naturally throughout the day, because obviously you have to breathe. Okay, here we go, targeted cars. Now, if you're not comfortable on your knees, you don't need to be on your knees. You could stand. One hand on the chest, one hand on the belly button. I want you to go double chin down. We're going to just move the neck here. So you'll be able to feel your hands moving. If you are rotating, try to come back to the middle. Just want to move at the neck. Double chin. And then take your chin towards the ceiling, looking up. Stretch through the neck rather than closing the back. In fact, if you feel any pinching on the back, that would be a stop. So no closing angle pain. And then double chin again. Back up. Always flexion, extension first with spine, of which this neck is part of, the cervical spine. Double chin and hold. Take a breath. As you breathe that ribcage down, as we just did on the floor, I want you to rotate to the right. Take your eye line to the right. Trace your collarbone with your chin. Ear behind shoulder now. Again, no closing angle pain. If you feel pain on that closing angle, just come away from it and then join the circle up again. Chin towards ceiling. Again, stretch through the neck. Come across the middle. Left ear, left shoulder. Eye line down. Trace the collarbone. Take another breath. As you exhale, chin along the collarbone to the left. Ear behind shoulder. If you do experience sort of, acute or chronic back pain, and you're not doing anything for it, just another circle. As a general rule, controlled movement is going to be of benefit to you. Obviously, you don't want to be moving through pain, but less movement and protecting yourself and reducing your spine's exposure to different movements is going to set you up for, well, you've just got less and less options. So like me, if you do have a pretty serious job at the moment of looking after a baby, that lifestyle is just not going to allow you just to stay in those small parameters. So training outside of those in a controlled way is going to help you then express that mobility in your everyday life. Give yourself a big hug. Forward fold down through the upper portion of your spine. We're going to rotate to the right again. Then take your right shoulder into your right pocket. So we call that lateral flexion. Don't fall over. Elbows up towards the ceiling. So a little bit of rotation now. Feeling this through the rib cage. Some people like to think about this as drawing a figure of 8 across the top. to the left now. Left shoulder, left pocket, so left lateral flexion. Come forward into sort of like a crunch. Notice it's just in my upper back and I'm not leaning forward. Okay, you can just as easily do this from this position. Forward fold. Lateral, rotate to the left. Left shoulder, left pocket. Elbows up towards the ceiling. Extend. Rotate to the right. Right shoulder, right pocket. And then forward fold. Same again. Down. Rotate. Right shoulder, right pocket. So feel the stretch on this left hand side. Elbows up towards the ceiling. Then extend across the top to the left. Left shoulder, left pocket. Feel that stretch on the right hand side now. And complete the circle. Rotate. It is a tricky one to feel. Okay. But when you do get onto it, you get that sensitivity into the middle part of your back. All right, it's a real nice one to do at the desk or when you're making a coffee, that kind of stuff. That T-spine or thoracic portion of your back is one that does get very frozen. Certainly in this position, text neck, that kind of thing. So being able to express or maintain a little bit of rotation and extension is going to benefit you years down the line. Okay, pardon me, that coffee's repeating on me. All fours. Now your classic cat camels, okay? People are familiar with this movement, but when we do it from a sort of Kinstretch or a FRC, functional range conditioning point of view, we're really wanting to think about segmenting the spine, okay? Lots of vertebrae in your spine, all right? And we would love to see independent control of each one of those. What does that look like when you're doing the cat camel? Well, one piece moving at a time rather than chunks of spine moving, okay? So that you get a nice wave-like curve or a curve. But obviously when I'm moving, it will look like a wave, all right? We're going to start each movement today just from the coccyx. So hands underneath shoulders if you can. If you need to be on your fists, that's also fine. Take a breath in. As you breathe out, breathe that rib cage down as we did before. And now I want you to start tucking your tailbone underneath you, okay? And so you try to make that curve. Now, if you've never done this before, me asking for segmentation, you're like, I don't really know what you're talking about. That's fair enough. All right. Slowly. Don't move too fast. Tuck, tuck, tuck. So I go from my coccyx through the lower lumbar spine, lower back, pull my belly button in towards my spine. I then move up past my belly button up to that lower rib region. As I now start to take my sternum away from the floor. Up through the upper portion of my back. Now you can push the shoulder blades if you want. You get very rounded, all right? But that's not necessarily your spine moving there. And then finally I start to tuck my chin. And I end up in flexion. Okay? Take another breath in. Breathe out. Rib cage down, or it can feel like your rib cage now is giving you a little bit of a hug, like a corset. Now, starting at the coccyx again, we're going to think about sticking the tailbone in the air. So we're going to start to load the spine. You can think about pushing your hands and knees away from each other. So staying rounded in the upper back, chin tucked. We're now going to try and segmentally take the tailbone one vertebrae at a time into the air. And move up through my lower spine now, nice and slowly. Trying to avoid any quick movements so that I end up just moving in one space. Through that lower back. Now take my sternum towards the floor initially, through my shoulders. You might have seen a big chunk of my back move there because I'm not very mobile through my upper back. And then we take from that tuck position, start to take our eye line towards the ceiling and stretching through the chin. Take a big breath in. Breathe that rib cage down. Try and eke out a couple more millimeters. Keep the eye line up towards the ceiling. And then last one, we're going to tuck. Pull the belly button in towards the spine. You can imagine that you're pulling your hands and knees towards each other as you start to tuck that tailbone in underneath you again. Eye line still up. And then tuck the chin. All right, that's a couple of cat camels. Some of you may have felt really disjointed there, wobbling a lot, have no idea what's going on at all. If you were able to hit the top and the bottom positions, great, and you don't know whether you were segmented in the middle, that's okay. If you were on film or you filmed yourself before, if you've worked with me before, and you do know that you don't have very good individual control of each vertebrae, okay, and you move in chunks, or a lot of people just have one position in the back here, probably just above the lower back and before it goes into the T-spine, where they move a lot and the rest of it is all quite blocky. So how do we bring awareness to specific areas in that spine? I could just, me cueing you through verbally or even physically through cat camels and saying, stick your tailbone in the air, come on, up, up, up. It's too complicated. We need to be more specific with our input, and we can be specific by using hinge point training. Now, there are a couple of ways to do that, and as I said, I'm going to give you a verbal explanation of what that is. But imagine you've got a vertebrae, then a space, then a vertebrae, and then a space. Okay, we're going to work, or you would work by getting your fingers, or if you're lying on your side, into the gap between two vertebrae, so you can feel that space. All right, or you could lie on your back here and put something underneath you, like I don't know, a pen, all right, or a chapstick or something like that. A lip salve, chapstick, lip salve, in the space between two vertebrae. And then what you can do is, once you feel that pressure, you can then try and isolate a movement whereby you increase pressure into that object. Okay, and then try and pull away. Essentially, it's a mini or a very individual cat camel on that specific point. That force there is probably not going to be enough stimulus in order for you to keep that for very long, but it will give you an awareness of that particular point of your spine. You would push in and pull off that object, whether it's your thumb or, like I said, if you're lying on your back, whatever you're using in order to create that sensation. You would push into it and pull off of it, just using the muscles of your spine 3 or 4 times, hold for 3 to 5 seconds, and then move up to the next segment and the next segment and the next segment. You could do the whole spine. You could just do the lower back, okay? Wherever you feel like you're moving just as a block, that would be where we would want to try to increase sensation using this hinge point training. Once you've done that a few times, then you can go back to the cat camel and then try to put it in, or that new sensation back into a new movement or a more complex movement of full flexion extension using cat camel. All right. So I'm not going to go through that because it's quite an individual endeavor, but we are now going to just try to isolate moving that lower back. So without too much kit at all, really, although if you do have a cushion, it might be comfortable if you had something for your head. All right, I want you to go to that all fours position again, neutral spine, and then you're going to lower the arms down. All right, from there you can put your head into the floor and then push or rock shoulders forwards of your elbows. You push your arms into the floor, so most of the weight is into your hands, and you can see now that my upper back is very much rounded. If I keep pushing my hands into the floor,
I can stay fixed in that position. So I know now that I'm not going to be moving my upper back. Okay, so I keep my weight forward. That means now I can isolate moving just through my lower back. So again, we're going to do some flexion extension work here. Essentially just cat camels again, but just isolating the lower back, sticking the tailbone into the air. I really want you to work to your end range now. And when you find that end range, as I'm in extension, I want you just to hang out there and see if you can just squeeze out a few more millimeters as you exhale. Breathe in. As you start to exhale, change the position. As we now go into flexion, tuck the tailbone in underneath you. Get to your end range there. Take a breath. And then the opposite way again. Tailbone into the air. Belly button down towards the floor. Don't worry if you're not moving as much as me. That's absolutely fine. It's the intention that we're after. Take a breath at that end range again. Tuck the tailbone underneath. Belly button in towards the spine. Like I said, if you're not comfortable on the floor like that, last one, extension, flexion. So there you've blocked the upper portion of your back, so you can just focus on moving through the lower portion of your spine. So a couple of those. It's worth saying that you don't have to do this whole class, all right? You can just take the ideas, with the main idea, which is just move more through pain-free movement, all right? And then using some of these other techniques, what we're going to do now, which is pails and rails, you can start applying force in these varied positions, and that's how you're going to build up resilience in those tissues so that you can actually do some training, so that the next time you're there doing a task in your life, like picking up a child or boxes off the floor or whatever it is that normally causes you some discomfort, that you've got some controlled training gone into that spine, rather than just relying on that particular task to do the training. All right. So lower back segmentation. Let's look at thoracic pails and rails. Okay. If you're not comfortable like this, you can put cushion behind your knees. Okay, that's fine. No problems. All right, get comfortable, but I'm going to set it up so that we are hands forward. All right, you can tuck the tailbone just a little bit, and we want to focus now on the thoracic portion, which is all the spine or the vertebrae which are associated with your rib cage. Okay, it starts at the collarbone and it finishes at the base of the ribs. I want you to take yourself now, if you can, into what you believe is the most extension that you can get. Okay, flexion is the rounded bit. Extension is chest down or towards the floor, eye line up. Pulling your hands down into the floor to help create more extension. I want you to take 3 breaths here. With each one, I want you to think about breathing the ribcage down and see if you can just tease out a little bit more passive extension through that T-spine. A lot of us are frozen up here, well, not frozen, but don't have a lot of movement up there. All right. Hopefully this is going to help. All right. Recapture a little bit more mobility in this upper portion of your back. So pails and rails. Pails and rails are a directional force. Everybody can just keep breathing here. It's supposed to be a passive thing, so you're not supposed to be white knuckling the floor or red as a beetroot in the face. Pails and rails is isometric work, so you don't actually move, but we are going to start applying force in a couple of directions. I've asked you to be an extension. So a PALS, or progressive angular isometric load, is thinking about all the muscles that would help take you into the opposite position, which is flexion. Okay? Because we've blocked you in the floor, all right, we're going to use the floor as our resistance to push into and create that isometric load. All right. The rails movement is to train all the regressive tissue, or the regressive angular stuff, which is all the stuff in your upper back, all the stuff that would help you pull more into the shape that you're currently in. Okay, so regressive tissue, more extension. Take another breath. Breathe out. Now, pushing your hands down into the floor, I want you to think about doing a crunch with the top two abs. Okay, that's going to load the stuff on your back that's currently being stretched. I want you to build that contraction up in the abs from 20 to 40 to 60% effort. You might be able to see my arm shaking a little bit now. You can start to shorten your breath a bit, but really focusing on bringing that rib cage, or these collarbones, sorry, down towards the base of your ribs. Keep holding at 60%, imagining that you're doing that crunch even though you haven't moved. That's the direction of the force. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Now, without moving your head, I want you to now to contract all the stuff across your thoracic spine or across your shoulder blades, and think about taking your collarbones towards the ceiling. You can think about pushing your hands away and down into the floor. Push your hands away as you feel like you're lifting that collarbone, or those collarbones, up towards the ceiling. Go through your percentages of effort again. Up to 60. Sternum is traveling towards the floor. Collarbones up towards the ceiling. That's the direction of the force. 4, 3. Dial that intensity down. Breathe. See if you've got any more passive stretch in that upper portion of the back. We're going to do one more of those. Okay, so first is PALS. So all the muscles that would help you go into flexion. All right. You can help yourself here by dragging your hands backwards, all right, even though they're not going to move, and crunching through those top two abs, thinking about trying to take your collarbones towards the base of your ribs. So from your extended position, take a breath in, load into the floor through the hands, start to crunch. Up to 60% effort again. Sensation should be loaded across the upper portion of your back. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and pull collarbones up towards the ceiling now. So you're trying to go into more extension. It might not look like I've moved at all, but my intention has changed. And now I'm trying to get more space between the base of my ribs and my collarbones by contracting all the stuff in my upper back, pulling my hands towards, pushing my hands away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. Now, staying in that position, you can now, on your own time, move in and out of flexion and extension. So, putting that load in there, isometric load, is now training us at those end ranges, okay? You can build those percentages of effort up over time, and then once your stimulus reaches, so once you're into sort of above 80%, that's when you can start to feel, or your body is going to say, okay, I know that I want to be able to keep that range, so we're going to develop musculature that is going to allow and keep that movement, all right? Okay, so the next thing is to do a little bit more training through that thoracic region. So we're going to use a technique called passive range holds. Now for that, you're going to lie down onto the floor. And we're going to bring our hands into the side of our bodies so that you could push yourself up off the floor. Now, hip bones are going to stay down, feet are going to stay into the floor. All right? If you need a little cushion for your head, that's fine to start with. All that stuff that we just trained, we're going to contract, pushing your stuff away from the floor.